Britain is ablaze with scandal, and Keir Starmer is at the centre of it all. As farmers from the Garden of England march on Whitehall in protest, accusing Labour of orchestrating the destruction of family-run farms with a devastating inheritance tax raid, Starmer faces a second firestorm. Critics have branded him a warmonger for his aggressive support of Ukraine, risking direct conflict with Russia. Meanwhile, a jaw-dropping revelation has exposed British police forces for logging tens of thousands of absurd, non-crime hate incidents, leaving many to question whether law enforcement has completely lost its way. These overlapping crises, Labour's betrayal of rural communities, Starmer's foreign policy gambit, and the policing farce, paint a damning portrait of Britain in turmoil. Public confidence is plummeting, and Labour's promise to be the party of fairness and competence is unravelling before the nation's eyes. Let's dive into the full scope of these scandals and uncover the shocking details tearing Britain apart. Farmers in Kent, a county once crowned the Garden of England, are in open revolt. For families like the Bastables, who have farmed their land for generations, Rachel Reeves's inheritance tax reforms represent nothing short of betrayal. With agricultural estates worth over £1 million now subject to a 20% levy, passing down a family farm has become an unaffordable dream. For the Bastable family, whose Park Lee farm has been their lifeblood for 4 generations, the fallout could be catastrophic. Kate Bastable, the matriarch of the family, described her devastation in a heartfelt interview. "It's heartbreaking," she said, her voice trembling. "All we want is to leave this farm to our children, but with this tax, they'll inherit debt instead of land. What's the point of working so hard if the government is just going to take it all away?" Kate's 2 eldest children, aged 18 and 21, had always planned to take over the farm, continuing the family legacy. Now they're questioning whether it's worth the financial burden. The family purchased the farm just 8 years ago, taking on a massive mortgage and investing heavily in equipment to modernise their operation. Those investments, Kate said, now feel like a gamble they've lost. Tuesday saw thousands of farmers from across the UK converge on Whitehall in protest. From Northern Ireland to Wales, they travelled hundreds of miles to stand shoulder to shoulder with their Kentish counterparts. Placards reading "Stop Labour's Tax Raid" and "Save Our Farms" were held high, their slogans underscoring the growing rift between Labour and rural communities. "We feel betrayed," Kate said. "Labour promised to protect working people, but this tax proves they don't understand us. Most farmers I know earn less than minimum wage. We're not wealthy landowners, we're just trying to survive." Tenant farmer Ben Townsend joined the protest, calling Reeves's tax policy a nail in the coffin for Britain's agricultural industry. Townsend warned of devastating ripple effects that could collapse entire rural economies. "Farmers are the foundation of this country," he said. "Without us, there's no food, no economy. Labour doesn't seem to realise that when farms fail, everything else fails with them." As protests continue to simmer, Keir Starmer faces an entirely different kind of backlash, this time on the international stage. During a heated debate on GB News, Starmer was accused of being a warmonger by Jorge Martin of the Revolutionary Communist Party. The criticism stems from Labour's staunch support for Ukraine, including the deployment of British missiles to the region. Martin argued that Starmer's actions are provocative and risk dragging Britain into direct conflict with Russia. "Military experts agree this war is lost for the West," Martin said, "yet Starmer keeps pouring billions into a conflict we can't win. At the same time, pensioners in Britain are freezing because they can't afford their heating bills. It's scandalous." The debate comes amid a stark warning from Russian President Vladimir Putin, who declared that further Western intervention could provoke retaliation. Critics of Starmer have seized on this, accusing him of playing a dangerous game with Britain's national security. Robert Jones, a research fellow at the York Institute, defended Starmer's policy, pointing to the importance of standing up to Russian aggression. "This isn't warmongering," Jones argued. "It's about supporting democracy and protecting Ukraine from tyranny. Starmer is doing what any responsible leader would do." But Martin was quick to highlight what he called Labour's hypocrisy. "Why is Britain funding Ukraine while turning a blind eye to Israel's aggression in Lebanon?" he asked. "It's blatant double standards, and the British public hasn't even had a say in this escalation." The lack of parliamentary debate on Britain's actions in Ukraine has further inflamed public anger. Many feel that decisions of such magnitude should be subject to greater scrutiny, not rushed through under the guise of bipartisan consensus. While Starmer grapples with accusations of warmongering, Labour faces yet another scandal on the home front. A recent report revealed that British police forces logged over 13,000 non-crime hate incidents last year alone. The cases range from the petty to the outright absurd. In Cambridgeshire, a neighbour called a woman a Rottweiler during a parking dispute, prompting an investigation. In Wiltshire, police intervened when a man mocked another person's haircut. And in South Yorkshire, an argument over a hedge led to allegations of homophobic abuse when one neighbour called another a Leonard. The most bizarre case involved a Lithuanian man in London who accused his barber of giving him a rough haircut as an act of anti-Russian hate. The incident was recorded as a non-crime hate incident before the report was later withdrawn. Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp was scathing in his criticism of the police. "This is nonsense," he said. "An aggressively administered haircut is not a police matter. The police should be solving real crimes, not logging hurt feelings." Former Metropolitan Police Detective Peter Blexley echoed this sentiment, calling the situation ridiculous and a sign of poor leadership within the force. "No wonder there's a crime wave in this country," he said. "The police are too busy chasing nonsense while serious criminals walk free." Reform UK's Lee Anderson was even more blunt. "Our streets are overrun with real crime, and the police are wasting time on this garbage," he fumed. "They've lost control of the streets and their minds." As these scandals unfold, they reveal deep cracks in Britain's leadership and institutions. For farmers like the Barstables, the fight for their future feels like a personal battle. For critics of Starmer's foreign policy, the stakes are nothing less than global security. And for those appalled by the policing debacle, the question is whether public trust can ever be restored. The mounting pressure on Labour is undeniable. Rachel Reeves faces growing calls to reverse her inheritance tax policy before irreparable damage is done. Keir Starmer must address public fears over his Ukraine strategy and clarify Britain's role in the escalating conflict. And Britain's police forces will need to rebuild their credibility if they are to regain the public's trust. One thing is clear: the nation is watching, and the consequences of inaction could be catastrophic for Labour and the country at large. The scandals may differ in scope, but together they paint a damning picture of a government struggling to navigate crises on every front. For many, the question isn't whether Labour will recover, it's whether Britain can endure the fallout. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more updates.